is ended. The Atari 8-bit podcast.
Told them that the right thing for them to do is to push out game software. They didn't tell me that it's supposed to take 6 to 9 months to go get that done. Piracy was there, but it wasn't something that we had a handle on. It was sort of viewed at the time, by me at least, as a cost of doing business.
This is Antic, the Atari 8-bit podcast. I'm Kevin Savitz. John Reese was the founder and CEO of Tronix, the software company that produced 2 games for the Atari 8-bit computers, Kid Grid in 1982 and Juice in 1983. The company also produced other games for Commodore computers, including Sidewinder, Deadly Skies, and Gold Fever for the VIC-20, and Suicide Strike for the Commodore 64. John was simultaneously founder and CEO of Monogram, the software company that produced Dollars and Cents, home financial software that was available for the Atari ST and IBM PC. Both companies were subsidiaries of Softsel, an early software distributor. This interview took place on March 12, 2016. Where should we begin? I know that you were at Citibank, and I know that you were designing ATM machines and things, and that sounds fascinating all in itself. But then somehow you left there and you went off to make a game software company. So can you tell me the story?
Yeah, it's not right. It is anecdotal. Let's see. I was at Citicorp for about 8 years, through 1982, when they wanted me to move from LA to New York to become a banker, and that just wasn't in the cards for me. And yes, I designed. Basically, I was the program manager for all the ATMs, that first major deployment of ATMs in the U.S. for that matter. We put 500 ATMs throughout all of New York. And they were a major change in terms of the concept of self-service banking and a lot of stuff. Anyway,
I bet. Before we go on to Tronix, I mean, talk to me about the public perception of ATMs. Were people frightened of them, or were they ready for them?
Not only were people frightened, I was frightened. I joined in 1975. My background was programming. When I first got out, I got out of school in 1968 and came here to L.A., worked on the Apollo moonshot as a very junior programmer, and then left and did some data communications software, and then got called up from Citicorp to come join them in 1975, and quickly got onto this project called, developing the ATMs. And there were about 10 automatic teller machines that were more like vaults, and they didn't even have screens in them, and they existed in place. And I got the position, and they said, well, we were going to put one in every branch. I said, gee, this is not the machine you want to put out. It's not user-friendly. It's not a consumer product. So we convinced senior management, and I'm talking about the CEO of Citicorp. I mean, it was a very high-level project, to give us a year to develop something much more substantial with a screen and buttons on the left-hand side pointing to text on the screen, which is a user interface that didn't exist at the time. Mm-hmm. And we ended up, it was a very large success. The big issue, of course, was, let's see, do you really want to put out a machine that spits out cash in the middle of the night in Harlem? I mean, really, does that sound like a winning product process? It turned out that it's been a boon, of course, a major transformational product. But it wasn't without, CEOs have to have guts and vision, and at the time the folks that I worked for at Citicorp were that and had that, and it was, in my mind, a major deal. And we changed the nature of consumer banking, and the people found it to be more convenient, and the idea of doing it online versus talking to an irate teller in Manhattan was something that people were willing to do. Mm-hmm. So that was a major project. And then I also had home banking way before the internet, because we did home banking with dial-up lines to Citicorp and to B of A at the time. Anyway, I left Citicorp in before I do that, the connection to Tronix is the following. There are two guys who used to work with me and for me at Citicorp. One by the name of Bob Leff, and the other Dave Wagman, and they had left Citicorp about a year before I did, and they started a company called Softsel, which you may or may not remember. Softsel was in the days when there was shrink-wrap software, which you know a lot about. Mm-hmm. There were computer land stores, and there were lots of stores, and Softsel they created a niche in the market called they were a distributor. So what they did during probably I'd say it's 80, 81, 82 kind of time frame, is they created a business that spoke to programmers who were putting together funny little things, and they took their boxes of shrink-wrap software and they sold them into the stores.
Okay. So was this sort of like a competitor to Ingram Micro, that sort of business?
It was, yes, it was actually before Ingram Micro D. Yeah.
Okay.
But it's the same kind of business, very thin margin, lots of high volume, a big deal. And Softsel became a very large-scale player in that space, and they had I've got an award somewhere in here. I can't find it in my office, but it's they had the Softsel hot list, the top 100 products in each of the categories, from games to whatever else. Anyway, Bob and Dave had started Softsel, and it was going really gangbusters. I mean, they were one of the fastest growing companies from revenue standpoint, perhaps in the U.S. at the time. When I left Citicorp, I was trying to figure out what I was going to do. They said, "Hey, help us with some consulting, because we're trying to figure out how to take full advantage of the stuff we got here. You've got lots of history with us, and we'd love you to be involved." So I did a little bit of consulting for them, and at the time I said, you ought to take advantage of your distribution channel, saying, gee, why don't you, the primary product at the time were computer games, VIC-20, Commodore 64, etc., and Atari 400 and 800. I think I remember all the names. So I said, gee, you know what? You really ought to push your own product out through this channel, because you've got a locked-in set of buyers, which are the stores, and you ought to do that. And games are probably the best thing for you to push, but, They said, great, why don't you develop some games? I said, me? I'm a banker. What do you, it's not my skill. What I wanted to do was provide a home banking product. And so I ended up starting a company within Softsel called Monogram. Mm-hmm. And we had two brands at the time, one called Tronix, which I was doing because they wanted games. And the other was called Dollars and Cents, which was a personal finance package that I published back that time frame. And Dollars and Cents became the best-selling personal finance package before Scott Cook and Quicken came about 2 years later. But going back to Tronix, so here's a banker who has told them that the right thing for them to do is to push out game software, and I don't know, it's not my background or inclination, but they didn't tell me that it's supposed to take 6 to 9 months to go get that done, and the season was coming up, the end of the year season, so I went ahead and found some programmers and some guys to do shrink wrap, to do the shrink wrap software, and also to do the airbrush covers. Mm-hmm. And we came out with such things as Galactic Blitz and Suicide Strike, and I don't know, about 15 titles for the Atari, and I'm trying to remember if we did VIC-20. I know we did the Atari was the primary.
You did VIC-20 first, I believe, and then Atari, and then some Commodore stuff. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I'm sure your knowledge base of that stuff is probably better than mine because I've left it in the ancient history.
Sure.
Anyway, so and I did learn one thing. And as a matter of fact, in my house, I've got a game room with a pool table in it, and one of the things that adorns it's a two-story room, and so up at the top are all of the cover art for all of the games, the
nice.
Original art.
Oh, cool.
So I've got about 10 different pictures that one of the designers did that we used for all of the products. So that's still sitting there, staring at me when I go into the game room.
Nice.
But let's see. The other thing that was most interesting to me from a learning curve about Tronix was, again, I didn't know about retail channels and that kind of software world. So because of our great ability to push products into the stores, we had huge pickup of our games into the stores. Same thing was true for dollars and cents, for that matter. During the Christmas time of, I forgot what year that was, but basically there was this things called return privileges that the stores had, which means that if they don't sell it through after a couple of months, they can return the product to you. So I had a spectacular multi-million-dollar fourth quarter, and then a very small. We still did fine. We did fine, but it was a learning curve about understanding how retail channels work and the like from a business standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the genealogy of Tronix. What basically happened subsequent to that was some other folks got involved in the Tronix line, not myself, because that really wasn't my skill set. And I pushed on dollars and cents. And then this is more of a business story than the technical story, but Softsel was trying to go public, and their investors sort of said, you know what, you're a distribution company, and this Monogram stuff and dollars and cents, while it's doing really well, really isn't. It's going to confuse the investors, and therefore we really think you ought to sell the company. And Bob and Dave sheepishly decided that they needed to do that real quickly, and the company got sold. I, again, was president of the subsidiary. I didn't own the company at that time on my own. The company was sold. I and the new owner didn't see eye to eye about what to do with the business and how to grow it, and therefore, after a fairly short period of time, I left, and he went through about 5 presidents before dollars and cents went down the tubes, something like that. So a couple of years, there was a legacy to it that literally I got calls for about it for, I don't know, 5-7 years afterward. People were still using it, maybe 10 years after, they were still using the product, which was a little bizarre.
Wow. To what company was Monogram / dollars and cents sold?
Oh, it was sold to an individual investor, and he kept it under the same names. And I don't know what happened to Tronix. I'm sorry not to be able to be more informative there, whether the game line just went away and it got absorbed inside Softsel or not. My focus was indeed on the Monogram side and the dollars and cents side. Again, it stayed under that title, under Monogram, and with dollars and cents being the product, for, I'd say, 3 or 4 years before I no longer heard about it.
So it sounds like, as of the 2 subsidiaries of Monogram and Tronix, that the bigger winner was Monogram?
Oh, by far, Monogram was by far. Tronix was the pragmatic results of my consulting activity with the guys, and literally we put out those products in about 2 months from start to finish. I mean, It was like crazy. It was like bizarrely quick, and those were. I'm trying to think of other stories that would make. The other thing that was sort of fun was in the early '90s there was this thing called the Mac that was being pushed by a guy by the name of Steve Jobs. So we went and that was interesting because we launched Dollars and Cents with. We were one of the first products to launch with at the 1984 Moscone Center. We launched Dollars and Cents as one of their lead products. So yeah, it did quite well. And the evangelist that was involved at the time, that was the young evangelist who came by, was a guy by the name of Guy Kawasaki, who's now plays in the industry a lot.
Sure. I'm not surprised. I mean, it's not really surprising that Monogram did well for you because, I mean, that was really your wheelhouse with your experience at Citibank.
Right. Actually, so at the time on Monogram, I literally cut deals to do home banking. This is in, 1980, 81 time frame. I cut deals with, maybe it's a little after that, maybe like 84. We cut deals with Bank of America and Citibank to launch home banking services where you'd be able to do such wild and woolly things as download your statement and upload a payment.
That'll never work. No one will ever want to do that.
That's right. That's right. So that was pretty heady days, and did different kind of things at that time.
In a couple of the articles I read, they kind of implied that Tronix was a Trojan horse for starting with games, but then later you wanted to wedge home banking in there. But it sounds like that just ended up being the other subsidiary instead. Yeah,
Tronix was indeed the first thing out, and it was, they said, as I mentioned, the consulting was very clear that what they should do, Softsel should do, is take advantage of the very frictionless pipe they had into the stores, computer land stores and all the rest, and take advantage of that by putting game software instead of getting. Remember now, a distributor gets very thin margins, right? He pays a lot of money for the product that he buys, and there's only a small amount of money that you get between what you pay for it and what you sell it to the stores for, because they got to put their markups on it too. So it's a very large amount of dollars that they play through with a large inventory and a small amount of profit. Mm-hmm. Dollars and Cents, on the other hand, is more like a traditional software product where once you do your development, your ongoing costs are incredibly small, and therefore the profit margin for a product is significantly higher.
Sure. So were you the guy who was finding the programmers and finding the artists and all that? How did you go about that?
Well, let's see. It turns out Softsel, one of the things it did as a business was it evaluated the products before it put on the shelves, right? So they had a staff of 20 people who looked at all of the games that were trying to be picked up by Softsel to be put on the shelves. So I had the opportunity to look and talk to the developers. Artie Hartunian. Boy, I'm trying to remember the name of the developers.
He did the two Atari games, Artie.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Again, it's something I haven't looked at in decades and decades. But Artie was a young, very talented guy. Remember now, we're talking about machines that were measured in K rather than terabytes, right?
Right. Yeah.
Very, very, very different kind of world. But Artie was, I met him at a Softsel event, right, because of the nature of there was about 20 people that worked at Softsel reviewing games and business products and everything else by, would-be publishers that wanted to get their product picked up by Softsel and distributed. So that was a very easy process for me to identify what was sniffed at as potentially good guys, and my job really was more of fine-tuning. I didn't do very much personally on the product development side at that time, not on the Tronix side at least, and much more on putting together as a program manager the people necessary to pull it all together as a product, right? Getting the art done and the product out.
So we've talked about kind of the timeline of Monogram, but on the Tronix side, how long are we talking from life and death? I mean, it seems like it was probably only a couple of years.
The life of Tronix as I knew it was probably about a year, right? I left Citicorp in '82, and I can't remember the month, but I left Citicorp in '82 and joined Bob and Dave, and soon thereafter, probably 3 months after I left, and doing that consulting, and then moving forward. Monogram lasted for me until '86, so '82 to '86. Mm-hmm. But the Tronix line, again, the Tronix line was really only about a year. I'd have to look at the products themselves. I've got some in my garage still that are sitting there.
Let's see. Well, I mean, I've got a list here of everything, and basically Kid Grid and Sidewinder and Space Freaks and Swarm, and those are all 1982. And then in 1983, Juice, Suicide Strike, Deadly Skies, Gold Fever, Scorpion, and that's it.
I've got the artwork for every one of those. Nice. up on my wall. That's funny. These are 15 by 20 airbrush art pieces. They're nice. And I remember I had my favorites. Kid Grid was sold quite well. Juice was another one. And some of those games were, in my opinion, remarkably fun.
Mm-hmm.
They were good stuff.
A lot of them seem to be derivative of other popular games, but they added their own twist. They were faster, or they were more colorful, or something. It wasn't just a crappy copy.
I hope not. I didn't think they were.
No, they weren't. They were fun.
Yeah, and again, a couple of them were. I'm 69. Okay, so my kids at that time frame my older two boys were busy playing playing the games in the pizza place where we'd go out to eat, right? So, and these games were spectacular. The Ataris were great. I mean, they were remarkable. As a matter of fact, the company I'm now chairman of is a company called Parchment, and we got 150 people handling educational transcripts going from high school to colleges. Anyway, but in our game room, we have a couple of Ataris with all the old joysticks and the like for the staff to play with.
Nice. At Parchment? That's awesome.
Yeah. They're still there, right? As a matter of fact, one of the things that I'm now chairman, no longer CEO, and the CEO who, when we talked about it, he said, "John, do you have any of the old games that we can have?" So I gave him copies of the old games to use on the machines.
Nice. That's awesome. All right, so you're chairman. Let's talk about what you're doing today. You're chairman of Parchment, and what else?
Actually, as of about 2 weeks ago, I'm no longer chairman. I'm still a director. I founded the company. Let's see, Parchment I founded in 2003. It's a company that handles sending the transcripts from high schools to colleges electronically using the internet.
I'm pretty sure we used that when my kid went off to college, yeah.
Yeah, very likely. We have about a third of the U.S. that uses our services. The high schools use our services. And so that's done quite well. I founded that, and then in 2011, this fellow who started a little company called Blackboard, which was sold for $11 billion, $7 billion, excuse me, came up to me and said, gee, you started a company that I really wanted to start. And long story short, he's now the CEO. I was chairman for about 3 years, and now recently one of our lead investors became the chairman, and I'm still on board as a director.
Nice. See, back in the day, were you? I don't know. Were you concerned about piracy? Was that something that you had to think about?
Oh my goodness. Yeah, for sure. More on the Monogram side, of course, than the Tronix side. Not because of anything other than the ticket price on dollars and cents was about $175 or something like that, and we had a significant amount of piracy issues. I'm trying to remember what we specifically, how we focused on that and what we did. It was modest. It's certainly not where it is today, but there were some piracy was there, but it wasn't something that we had a handle on. It was sort of viewed at the time, by me at least, as a cost of doing business.
Right.
Not one that I enjoyed, but one that was there.
I noticed that I was doing my research. Tronix had a program from Don't Ask Software that I know you guys didn't create, but it seems like you were just being a distributor from it for Software Automatic Mouth. That seemed confusing.
Yes. Wow. Sorry for being wowed by all of this, but it really is dredging up old stuff.
Sure.
Don't ask. Yes, I think that's one of the things that did happen. We started to say, you know what really makes sense is not just to be to take advantage of the distribution channel. Why don't we act as a focal point for distributing other pieces of software? And Don't Ask was in that category. You're exactly right.
Do you remember any other software you did that for?
I was about to ask you that question. Were there any others on the list?
Not that I know of.
Don't Ask, I remember. Don't Ask, I remember, but I don't remember any.
I found another program called PM Animator, which was a utility program for the Atari, which doesn't seem like the kind of thing that your people would have created, but I don't know.
No, we didn't. But I don't even remember. I remember the name, but I don't remember. Were we the publisher for that?
Yes. I found a review of it.
Yeah, I don't remember. Yeah, I do remember that that was. I do remember the name, but I don't remember what the. I know we didn't develop that in-house.
Okay. Yeah.
So we sort of morphed. We certainly started off with some specific games where we were the author as well as we were the developer as well as the publisher. But then we, for a short period of time, augmented that. I think when I started getting focused in more on Monogram side, I'm fuzzy on whether or not I handed off Tronix to someone else inside Softsel. I can't recall specifically how that transition occurred, but my focus on Tronix became much smaller very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
I do believe that it was the right, from the standpoint of taking advantage of the business position that Softsel was in, it made a whole lot of sense. And, commonly referred to as vertical integration kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Is there anything from on either Tronix or Monogram that you think you should have done differently to make them even more successful?
Oh, well, on the Tronix side, for sure. And that was to have continued ownership of the business. I lost control. They had their reasons for wanting to let go of it, and I don't begrudge them that. But it went to someone who didn't have the same strategic vision for what to do with it that I had.
Mm-hmm.
And as a result, I didn't have control of its destiny, and that for me was not a good idea, and not a good exit. I stayed involved in. I like the banking world, and I like the world of payments, and we really did have quite a good run with dollars and cents. The one anecdote that I think is just interesting from the technology standpoint and the time frame, I had a meeting with our staff at Dollars and Cents at Monogram about this. There was this new thing called hard drives, external hard drives,
mm-hmm.
that were coming out.
Sounds promising. Tell me more.
Megabytes. They had 10 megabytes in them. 10.
You'll never fill that much space.
And that was a huge amount, right? And the funny part about it was, Dollars and Cents was a product for personal finance use, home finance use, and very, very small businesses. And we had a board meeting, and we basically said, well, should we develop software for that? And the board basically said, you know what? I'm embarrassed to say it, but we said basically, home user doesn't need 10 megs. Right? So for like 6 months, we procrastinated on development of an interface to the hard drive and taking advantage of external hard drives. It was, just seemed like so much memory. And so now I'm waiting for my terabyte thumb drive. That'll be next year.
Right. Yeah. I just had to buy a new drive to back up stuff to. The stupid thing is 5 terabytes, and the thing is, the size of a paperback book. And I just had to put it somewhere, and I put it just randomly on a first flat surface I could find, which was my Atari 810 disk drive. And I'm just looking, wow, I've got on the bottom of the pile this thing that holds 90K. And then on the top of the pile, this thing that holds 5 terabytes. It's so ridiculous.
I do one editorial, though. I do think it's real, which is, and it's fine, but in a small amount of space, these programmers, these developers, put an incredible amount of really great logic and great software. I mean, there's no question about it. Quicken is, forgetting the video side and all the rest of the stuff, is now, I don't know how big it is, but it's hundreds of times, maybe thousands of times bigger than Dollars and Cents was. Mm-hmm. And the core functionality that was done in those small machines, Apple IIs and the early Macs, was rather substantial. I mean, really, really good stuff. And people used to worry about, taking some lines of code out of a program. Very different world. Very different world. I'm still involved in software, and what folks do today was really hard to fathom when I first got started. Right, I was doing assembly language programming, back to the load A and store A, and really, really early days of programming. And it's now, it's really remarkable how efficient and how much you can get done in such a short period of time. It's transformed. It's hard to just fathom how much that transformation has occurred.
Yes, it is. if you could send a message to the Atari computer users that still exist, and you can right now, what would you tell them?
Enjoy. I think they're playing with stuff that's a lot of fun. As a matter of fact, you got my adrenaline up. I got to go find one.
Excellent.
There's a lot of programs that were fun to use. I'm not even sure if I do have the software sitting in my garage. I got to go find. Or actually, I'm going to Parchment for a board meeting next week. I will stop by the game room and pick up the joystick.
Excellent.
Anyway, pleasure talking with you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate your time today. If you enjoy these interviews and would like to contribute something, I encourage you instead to donate to one of our favorite organizations, the Internet Archive, at archive.org. The Internet Archive is a nonprofit digital library with the stated mission of universal access to all knowledge. They've done incredible things to preserve computer history, including hosting thousands of programs in an in-browser Atari emulator, creating the Wayback Machine, and offering full-page scans of countless Atari computer books and magazines. Make your tax-deductible contribution at archive.org/donate.